Welcome everyone. Thanks a lot for staying with us. You're watching Plain Speak with me, Shivani Gupta. On the occasion of International Day of Yoga, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, as you can see, is performing yoga at the UN office in New York. It's the 9th year since UN recognized June 21 as the International Day of Yoga through a resolution in 2014. Now PM Modi will also leave for capital Washington, D.C., where he's scheduled to meet Indian CEOs and President Joe Biden. Remember, earlier today, the Prime Minister had an interaction with a diverse group of eminent American academics and various fields such as agriculture, marketing, health, science and technology. Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla, also had a meeting with the PM in New York and praised him for his support towards new companies, ensuring their alignment with India's interests. In fact, he called himself a fan of Modi. Prime Minister Modi's visit holds immense diplomatic significance and represents the highest form of exchange between the two countries. While Prime Minister Modi has made several official visits to the US in the past, including participating in multilateral engagements like the Quad Leaders Summit, this particular visit holds a special distinction as it is his first state visit. But there are some usual suspects who are trying to accuse PM Modi of violating human rights and would be boycotting his upcoming speech at the US Congress. Are these usual suspects who are up in arms against the Prime Minister trying to malign India as well against facts? Haven't all of these charges, especially treatment of minorities in India, already been proved to be malicious and motivated? We will take that question to a special guest joining us in just a bit. But take a look at these visuals from the UN headquarters at New York. Prime Minister Narendra Modi leading the yoga session. It's been almost an hour. It's been participated by representatives from 195 countries. Of course, we've seen in the years gone by what a big occasion the Yoga Day has become and how many more people have accepted yoga as something incrementally improving in their lives. The event was also attended by top UN officials and envoys from across the world. Prominent names like Richard Gere, Jay Shetty, Vikas Khanna, Ricky Cage, Falguni Shah, Mary Milburn and more attended the event. A special guest is now joining us. Professor Salvatore Babones, American sociologist, who has called out global indices that malign India, especially on the issue of minority treatment. In the past has called out, quote, Indian intellectuals to be dishonest, is joining me on the show. Salvatore, you met the Prime Minister when he was on a visit to Australia. This time he's on a state visit to the US. Give me a sense, of course, of, everything that is going on as far as this American visit is concerned. Let me take that as an opening comment.
Well, I think Mr. Modi is following me around the world. I'm here in New York right now, and who should pop up but the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi. So it's a great pleasure as an American to be hosting Mr. Modi in my home country. Of course, there's a lot of excitement here, and I think that excitement is not limited to the Indian-American community, though that's, of course, where it is strongest. There's really a fantastic welcome for Mr. Modi from the business community, and I think that's because of India. It's not because of who Mr. Modi is, it's because of what India is and how important it's become to American businesses.
Right. I do want to talk about this new article of yours that has already been talked about quite a bit. In the past, you have referred to the Pew Research and talked about how people themselves, especially those from the minorities like Muslims and Christians in India, talk highly about their quality of life. Yet we see, and it is happening even as I speak, there are a couple of congresswomen, for example, who are up in arms about the human rights record and treatment of minorities in India, and they're calling for a boycott of the Prime Minister's speech at Congress. I want to begin by taking your outline of that, piece you have written, where you have once again highlighted how India is badly rated in press and religious freedom indices, but against evidence.
Yes, very much against the evidence. If we want to know about religious freedom, international religious freedom, it's really much better to ask actual people whether or not they can practice their religion, instead of turning to religious leaders, NGOs, advocates. Of course, everybody wants to be able to talk to some imaginary, quote unquote, masses. But the masses can speak for themselves in a democracy, and they can speak on surveys. We have very good survey data about the status of religious minorities in India. The survey data tell us that Muslims in particular in India report facing very little discrimination. 98% report being free to practice their own religion. 89% say, quote unquote, very free to practice their religion. 99% of India's Muslims are, quote unquote, proud to be Indian. And that's a narrative that I think Indians themselves have to understand. That, when we look at many international Muslim advocates who are trying to weaponize India's Muslims for their own advantage, we see a lot of complaints about the status of Muslims in India. Same thing about the status of Christians in India. Yet when we ask actual Indian Muslims, when we ask actual Indian Christians on a purely random sample basis, not going to a few leaders, but going to everybody and asking them in a random sample, are you free to practice your religion? Do you face discrimination in your country? Are you proud to be part of your country? We find that levels of discrimination and exclusion are very low, and levels of pride are very high.
Yeah. So why is it, do you feel, that despite being such a vibrant democracy, India keeps getting maligned for what is just factually incorrect? I mean, there are even exaggerations to the attempts that Muslims are losing their citizenship in India, that there is a genocide in India of the minorities. I mean, these are hyperbole of the worst kind that spread fear. But without getting into that, why do you think India continues to get maligned at the global stage, particularly with interest groups in America, for things that are not true?
The infrastructure of rankings has become thoroughly politicized. Let me just give you a detailed example from the U.S. International Religious Freedom Reports produced by the U.S. State Department. The U.S. State Department receives literally over 1,000 complaints of various kinds of hate crimes against Christians in India. Now, whether or not those are true, let's put to one side. Literally over 1,000. They receive a trickle, 4 or 5 complaints a year about hate crimes against Indian Muslims. Yet, when the report comes out from the U.S. Center for International Religious U.S. Commission for International Religious Freedom, every year they focus on the status of Muslims in India. They say, and this narrative is developed as the State Department shows that religious minorities can't worship freely in India, and then that narrative is shifted to, therefore, Muslims are at risk. And we've seen that in the confirmation hearings for Eric Garcetti, the new U.S. ambassador to India.
Yes.
We've seen that in the public statements of the U.S. ambassador at large for International Religious Freedom, Rashad Hussain. They all focus on the status of Muslims in India because they know it's an emotive issue. They know that people don't really take seriously the claim that Christians are threatened in India because India's Christians, again, actual Indian Christians in India, tell us that they're free to practice their religion. The most prominent American scholar of Christianity in India has told us, again, repeatedly that Christians do not face persecution in India. And so that narrative doesn't fly. So what happens? Instead, the narrative is shifted over to Muslims. And we have people like the Minnesota Representative Ilhan Omar telling us that there's going to be a Muslim genocide in India. And she repeats it over and over again on the House floor. And yet, again, all of our data tell us that this simply isn't true. Right. So what we see is outside groups. And I want to emphasize that. This is not Indian Muslims. We see outside groups, Muslims outside India, Al Jazeera, the Gulf, the whole Gulf infrastructure for public affairs, the U.S. Muslim groups who are attempting to weaponize, ironically, weaponize complaints about the treatment of Christians in India to say that India does not respect religious freedom and therefore Muslims are unsafe in India. This is a narrative that originates outside India, and unfortunately it's persuasive outside India, despite the fact that we know that Indian Muslims themselves are a, broadly speaking, happy, well-integrated, and very, very proud minority within India.
Salvatore,